Hey, it's John from Gatti's Garage. Today we're going to turn this chunk of aluminum into a billet seat hinge. Stick around to see how. Morning everybody, welcome back. Shop day today, Panhead build. Last week we got the seat pivot all machined and installed on the frame. So today we're going to work on the seat hinge or seat T, whatever you want to call it. If you remember last week we messed around with that a little bit. I wasn't happy with it. I talked about fabricating one from 1/4-inch aluminum, welding it all together, and the more I've thought about it, I've decided I'm just going to make one from a chunk of aluminum and we'll machine it one piece. I just think it's going to be cleaner. It's going to let me get an offset in it, which I need, which you'll see as we start working. And so anyway, that's what we're going to do. As always, on Mondays, limited time, so we're going to hop out in the shop and get going, find a chunk of aluminum, make up some quick sketches, and start machining. So we're just marking up a real quick sketch here so we can work our dimensions. Alright, so we took our measurements, we got our quick sketch here, again just so we got all our reference points. Now we're going to find a piece of material, get it cut to length, and head over to the mill. Alright, so this is our piece we're going to start with. It's a 1 inch by 2 inch by 7 inches long, 60/61 aluminum flat bar. So we're over here at the milling machine. We got some parallels in our vise. Go ahead and get this flat bar clamped into place. We've got our 1/2 inch end mill in the machine, which we're going to use to face off the far end and begin making our piece. Just about every bit of this part will be made here in the milling machine. It will require several different setups and several different cutters. So we're going to go ahead and face off this end. Once we have that faced off, that'll give us our 0 point, as we need to cut in 1 1/4 inches from the end to thin down to our dimension. So you can see once we got our end faced off, we're milling to our depth and checking with our depth micrometer. We want to thin this portion of the material out to 3/4 inch thick. This will in turn be machined into the fork, which will ride on the pivot bushing we installed on the frame last week. Now that we got our step cut, we're going to go ahead and put a 45-degree chamfering bit in there and cut a nice bevel on that flat face. This is really just for decoration and to give a clean, sloped finish as opposed to a sharp edge. Purely cosmetics. Got another tool change. This is our 1/4 inch radius roundover bit. Just putting a nice round end, flipped apart. Same process here again, just rounding the end. So we used our edge finder, changing that out for 1 1/8" 2 flute end mill. Going to use that end mill to plunge cut and then open up the end of this part, turning it from a solid chunk into a nice fork. The fork obviously will be what pivots on our frame pivot that we installed on the frame last week. Measure our dimension. It's a little bit of a tight tolerance still, so we'll take some meat off of each side of the fork and get it opened up to the dimension we need to correctly ride on our frame. Last thing we need to do is get each fork tang down to a 1/4 inch so that it works with our shoulder bolts and center pivot we made up last week. So hop on this front one first. Finish up cutting that outside down to our proper dimension, and we will flip it over to the backside tang and get it down to size as well. We're looking for just shy of a 1/4 inch thick on each tang, as that's the shoulder dimension of our shoulder bolts we machined up last week for our bearing pivot. Alright, you can see we flipped our part again, double checking our dimensions. Center drilled. Now we're putting a reamer in there to ream a 3/8 hole, again to ride on our center bushing and shoulder bolts that fit in our frame pivot from last week. Alright, so first test fit on the frame. Overall, we're liking how it looks. Went ahead and tried it both directions. We're going to flip it over so it lays flat. Once we do that, we've got our dicum. We're going to lay out and scribe a line, as the rear portion of this, where the seat will end up living, is going to get slimmed down significantly from 1 inch thick to a 1/4 inch thick. So we pop back to the bandsaw to go ahead and rough off a big portion of this material. Just saves some time over milling it all off. Plus it gives us a usable chunk of aluminum for another project. Being how expensive material's gotten these days, it's worthwhile to save these pieces as opposed to just turning them into chips on the mill. Took about 20 minutes to make this cut, but still faster than milling it all the way down. And we end up with a nice 5/8 by 2 inch chunk of aluminum. After that roughing cut on the bandsaw, it was back to the mill. We flattened off the bandsaw cut, changed our setup, went back to our 1 1/8" end mill, narrowed up the seat mounting tang, and just finished off all the little detail machining we needed to get done for the part. Last stage of the day, back over to the bike for one more test fit of this part. We've got all our clearances machined. We've got our seat mounting area narrowed down. Sliding our bushing through, getting our shoulder bolt mounted up, and checking our pivot. We want this to pivot nice and smoothly while not having any play. Also, we want it to sit as flat as possible so that when it's down, the seat will appear to be rigid mounted and you won't notice the airbags underneath. Alright guys, that's going to do it for today. We got our seat hinge machined. Pretty cool transformation, I would say. Still got to do a little bit of deburring, cleanup work, polish. I may do a couple lightning holes in here, just decorative. I'm kind of trying to decide on that, or maybe one large lightning hole. Again, just purely decorative. We'll see once we get everything mocked up, but real happy with how this turned out. I think it's much better than a folded sheet metal one, or even a fabricated and welded up like I talked about doing last week. So anyway, making chips, it's what we do. Appreciate you guys being here. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And we hope to see you next time at Gatti's Garage.